Hey Burns, how's it going?
Doing well, Dick. How about yourself?
I'm still vertical.
Well, that's good. It's been a while since we've done one of these, so I don't know if we'll be a little bit out of kilter, but what the hell, we'll give it a try. By
Okay,
the way, I want to compliment you on your new studio.
we're
And
in the
I
middle of a construction zone.
no,
And
no,
stuff.
no, but it looks great. It makes me think you and I are back at Claremont in our college years.
Yeah, well,
The only thing is, Dick, now we're backdropped by books that we can't read because our vision's gone south.
yeah, well, the part of the problem is that the stuff is so stacked up, like holding up lamps and everything else that to try and find something just doesn't work.
Yeah. Well,
And it's all
I
got to be moved because they're saying, well, if you want us to paint, everything's got to be 2 feet from the wall. And I'm going, there's no floor space to move stuff to. And
I'll
then
tell you what.
and then when they painted the banisters and installed new banisters so that I can, go up the stairs and everything, the paint was wet and I didn't realize it. I grabbed onto the banister and slid to the bottom, taking all the paint off. So that's been done. Uh, and today at any time, the contractor may show up because he's gonna grind out the grout and regrout the stairs. So I don't know, we're just floating along.
Well, we have family coming between Christmas and New Year's, and Kathy's going through a punch list. So even though we did a lot of, I guess the word would be refurbishing, it's amazing. You can still always find something. Maintenance adds up quickly in terms of cost.
Yeah,
And it's amazing in a country right now where what is it, something like 1 million jobs are going unfilled in the Biden economic disaster. Uh, you're hard pressed to find capable people to do the simplest things. Kathy, for reasons I won't go into, we're just both at an age and have some health issues. So we had a hard freeze last winter and lost some landscaping, and we're trying to replace that, but we can't get down on our hands and knees and dig and plant things like we did as younger people.
I didn't do
So
it.
so
I had a landscaper come in.
well, yeah, we did too. And then when Kathy a couple days later went out to water the things we had him plant, he had half the roots sticking out of the ground. But prior to that, she made a comment to me that a person here in our subdivision put up on next door that they were looking for a high school student just to do some general work to assist her around the house, what you'd call light maintenance or mowing the lawn. Hell, I mowed lawns among some of my first jobs and cleaned. I had one neighbor, I cleaned their pool, but nobody wants to get off the couch anymore. Well, I say nobody. Fewer people, much fewer. So it's just, I find myself scratching my head over that one. But anyways, I like the look.
It's a mess.
Well, it'd be a bigger mess if I was in your home because I'd be going through all those books.
Well, there's also boxes all over the floor. And I threw out so much stuff and gave away so much stuff. And you can't even tell that I've done it. but I have to get rid of this stuff so that I can move everything away from the walls and paint. Because I think it needs painting.
By the way, I have Shelby Foote's trilogy on the Civil War, and I pulled that down and had to get some dust off the first volume. And I thought I'd start going through it again because it's been a few years since I've read it. And the font size is too small for my waning eyesight, and it's hard to read, particularly I find it harder with paperbacks, but to hold up a magnifying glass, do you ever have to do that, or are your eyes good enough?
No, ever since I had my cataract surgery, my nearsightedness is, I mean, I can't see things close up. Even cutting my toenails is a hassle. So, no, see, I had a choice. And by the way, this is important to people that are getting cataract surgery, like my son-in-law's father. You get three choices. You get nearsighted, which is what you want, working with close-up small stuff. You get multifocus, which tends to cause halos and is a problem, or you get long distance focus. Well, I decided since I like photography, I would go long distance. And that's what I did. The problem is I can't even cut my nails because I can't see stuff close up.
Yeah, well,
So I would recommend, since you're going to get glasses anyway after cataracts, for other adjustments, I would recommend that get the close-up cataract or lenses.
well, nothing works for me given a particular eye condition I have. So almost always now, if I order a book, and I still read a lot and order a lot of books, I get them for Kindle because I can adjust that font size to a ridiculous level. You have to flip the pages a lot, but I can see it's a wonderful thing to be able to use. But I have books here I'm just dying to open up and reread, and if I use a magnifying glass, I can manage. But as an example, who wants to have to painstakingly go through a novel, with a magnifying glass in one hand? Because if I have a magnifying glass in one hand and I'm trying to keep the book open, say with my left hand, yeah, exactly. But Dick, how do I drink wine?
Uh, it's easy.
No, not if you're managing holding a book in one hand and the magnifying glass. I mean, these are things that old guys have to think about.
Yeah.
To our podcast fans.
Yes. Well,
Anyways, let me kick off with this lovely note. Why can't here I go picking on the millennials, I guess, or maybe we ought to use the euphemistic younger generation. But why can't they understand that socialism / communism, and they're not exactly the same, but certainly socialism leads to communism. Why can't they get it through their heads that that's a government controlled, a totalitarian regime with somebody heading it up who's going to become filthy rich and do the things that Americans, if left to their own volition, and ambition in a capitalist society have a legitimate chance to acquire for themselves. And I'm not just talking about material things and wealth. I'm also talking about education and satisfaction with one's life, security.
Yellow lab,
Huh?
yellow lab.
Yeah. But Biden has spent a long Thanksgiving weekend, is still doing it. He's one of those guys, there's always the guy in the corporation that cuts out early. If Thanksgiving always falls on a Thursday, he starts his Thanksgiving holiday on Tuesday and heads out the door with golf clubs in his trunk. And I never understood those kind of people. And typically they fail at what they're doing. They're just kind of skating through their responsibilities. But Biden and Jill cut out early, and they're staying in, I guess it's a tradition in their family, at a multi-billionaire's home up in Nantucket, while the nation is reeling from Biden inflation, COVID, the supply chain crisis, which has, empty shelves in grocery stores and hardware stores and toy stores for Christmas, etc. All the kinds of the open border with, we're worried about COVID, but all you have to do is find your way to the southern border from any country in the world, not just the northern or southern hemisphere, any country in the world, preferably poor and illiterate. And you can cross in unvetted, climb on board a bus, or scramble into a commercial airliner, and the federal government will use your money, Dick, and my money to put those people, seed them into communities all across the country. Now, all of this is going on, and the liberals are hailing it, and the young people, when they're interviewed on campus, are all behind the things that their professors are force feeding them with. And meanwhile, Biden is living in the lap of luxury as the nation's going to hell. And forgive me, and things need to be dealt with now and not next week. And to me, that is indicative of socialism. I mean, it's kind of what you would see happening in Venezuela as an example, as but one example. So that's my little editorial foray this afternoon, Dick.
Well, considering the source, it's obviously racist. But to continue on the thought that you had, I'm convinced, and I might be wrong, but I'm convinced when we were young, I'd go out in the snow, deliver newspapers on Sunday and take my sled and freeze my butt off and whatever. I mean, you weren't given anything. You were expected. In fact, you didn't really get an allowance. You got paid for what you did. If you mowed the lawn or something else, you get paid. Well, I think what's happened is the current generations, and I was talking about this with the grandkids, the current generations have been given so much that they expect that being given stuff is what they deserve. And if the government's going to be the sugar daddy, so be it. It's incredible. It reminds me of the lady in Chicago at, I guess it was Obama's acceptance speech or some such thing, who said, "Oh, I get a free cell phone and he's going to pay my mortgage." And then a year later, they tracked her down, they found her, and how's that worked out? The comment was, it didn't pay my mortgage, didn't give me a phone, didn't give me anything. As if that's wrong. I would argue it was right. If you want something, you work for it. I read somewhere that the average retiree's only got like $500 saved. And if you expect to live on Social Security, it's not going to happen.
Well, Dick, to your point, and a good example, I think a perfect example is under Biden, you don't even have to be an American citizen. He's proposing that, and I'm not about to give up on the term illegal alien because that is an accurate depiction of what a border jumper is, regardless of what the Democrats want to call them, migrants, or Ted Kennedy, who used to talk about these hapless human beings who live in the shadows. And I used to wonder, how do they live in the shadows if I go to Lowe's, all the aisles are marked in Espanol? I mean, how are they living in the shadows? They can walk into any big box store in America and everything's translated for them. Probably in a language that they're not literate in their country of origin. But anyways, back to your point, Biden's proposing that each quote unquote migrant, I call them illegal aliens, get $45,000. You talk about giveaways. I mean, that's welfare on steroids, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, because both the infrastructure bill, which has passed, and I should add, it wouldn't have but for 13 rhinos that caved, and now they have the Build Back Better. Some call it the reconciliation bill, but that has goodies galore for illegal aliens. And what have they contributed to the country? Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the seriously needy and afflicted, what are they getting other than a punch gut from the Biden administration? And I'd say the most classic example of that are the veterans, of which you're one, particularly the homeless veterans. And I don't understand. I truly don't understand how young people have gotten behind Bernie Sanders and all of his socialist crap. But if you stick a microphone in front of him and ask him, how many homes does Bernie Sanders own? And what are those homes, what are they worth on today's market? They're clueless. They don't know that he has 3 homes, one of which is a lakefront property, and they're all worth in excess of $1 million.
Well,
this guy who's peddling socialism.
Well, I think he also drives a Lamborghini. But, that gets back to things I can't verify. There's the other one floating around that Biden wants to give each parent that was separated from their children $435,000. And, I don't know the source for that. I've looked it up and I can't find it. What's ironic, though, is under military.com, which is the site that reports all the military stuff, a bunch of deployed soldiers now want their $435,000 because they were separated from their children and their parents. So it's just, it's madness.
I hope to God that, and I hate that it's even as far off as it is, but in the 2022 congressional elections, the Democrats take the beating of their lifetime, and it would be well deserved.
Yeah, Yeah, but on the other hand, the Republicans that are running against him aren't just as bad.
You know, Dick, you just stole my thunder. That was going to be my next comment, that
Well, they make
with,
it.
with some very good exceptions, there are a lot of Republicans that are wishy-washy, and you know, it's almost a game played between the two parties. Although I think that was more the case in past years, and now the radical left has so captured the Democratic Party that they truly are a much bigger threat to the nation than even, you know, the so-called rhinos, of whom I have no use for. So, but there are a whole lot of topics out there to talk about, but it's your turn.
Well, you know, the one that still gets me, well, there are a lot that still get me, but, you know, we can start off with the so-called shipping issue thing, whatever they want to call it.
Supply chain crisis.
Oh, supply chain crisis, yeah. And you got people saying, bring in the National Guard. Well, you can't, because the governor is the only one that can authorize it. Or the president, maybe, depending on the situation. So that's a half-ass approach. We got that. Oh, one that really gets me. Now, I know this is going to sound racist, but I give that to you. What really gets me is the Annie that's going to be on Thursday. And the whole cast is basically black, which led my, well, we were talking about it at home. And we go, well, I guess I can play Porgy and Bess. I mean, why?
No, Dick, I'd rather see you cast as Othello.
Okay, that would work.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you something. We both had a grin in saying that. If there was a white Othello cast in today's environment, that the libs would be apoplectic, and they would be calling that race appropriation. I mean, whatever they want to do is fine, and whatever we want to do is racist, homophobic, and all those buzzwords they love to use. And I just wish this country could find a way back. I call it true north, but quit looking at people from the perspective of whether they're white, black, brown. Just, we're people. I don't know, as an example, and I may have mentioned this in earlier podcasts, but I defy you to sit through a long evening of television and see even a handful of television commercials with white actors and actresses doing them. It's, in other words, the pendulum has swung so far the other way. If blacks comprise something like 16, 17% as a demographic group of the population, then why would they be doing 100% of the television commercials, based on the fact today that race is still a predominant, you know, subject? And I would understand their point of view if somebody were to say, well, for years and years and years, you know, all we saw were white people doing commercials. I think that's a fair criticism, fair comment. But it's just so absurd right now. We're still the majority. We're probably not long for that anymore, because the border, that's all part of the Democratic plan. But, you know, let's mix it up. It's, and some of the commercials are just incongruous.
Well, you know, you said it far better than I could. You know, it ought to be mixed up, and the pendulum has swung too far. And, you know, I'm in a mixed marriage, and I normally don't discuss it, but the fact is that even my spouse thinks it's ridiculous. You know, it's like rewriting history. If Porgy and Bess traditionally was done with black actors, and I picked Porgy and Bess because it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I like it too.
You know, why must we? I mean, what's the justification for swinging the way it's going? Are you going to tell me? Well, it's just an odd fact that that's how, you know, the good actors were found. They all happen to be this or all happen to be that. You know, if you believe that, you're full of shit. And as long as people have that approach and do that approach, somebody's going to be irritated. And all it's going to do is lead to more issues.
And here's an example of something I don't understand. The industry, let's call it the advertising industry, is, and I don't even think predominantly is the word, almost exclusively is putting blacks into television commercials. Okay. But then I turn around and the left has decided that we got to remove Aunt Jemima from a pancake box because that's somehow a racist stereotype. Hell, I think Aunt Jemima ought to be damn proud that her pancakes are good.
Well, and her syrup is good too. And the question is, who's going to take over? Mrs. Butterworth? No, you can't have Mrs. Butterworth. It's just like, what's going to happen to Cracker Barrel?
Now, everything has racial overtones. It's just, and I think the Democrats use that. I mean, that's the whipping boy. Maybe that's not the right term, but rather than deal with substantive issues and address problems and do problem solving, they spend all their time, and you can see it when they go on the Sunday, you know, news shows in the Sunday morning. All they talk about are things like race and gender. By the way, and another segue here. Forgive us, folks. We're just dancing around here, getting our sea legs. We haven't done a podcast for a couple of weeks. Now I'm having a senior moment, and I lost my train of thought, Dick. Help me here. Cover a subject well before it'll come back to me.
Well,
my synapses aren't firing.
Okay, let me take a break. You know, for 10 years, I've been in total pain. I've got 3 neurologists.
Oh, you're doing a commercial now.
Yeah, well, all they do is keep on, you know, gabapentin, whatever, you know, methotrexate, whatever. Hasn't worked. 3 of them. I finally went back to my primary care doctor, who is my absolute hero, and they put me on Cymbalta, which is used to treat depression, but it also short circuits pain. And I got to tell you, for the first time in 10 years, I can walk without pain. I don't go to sleep with pain. I mean, you know, you were talking about high points. What did I do this week? That's what I did, and it's really incredible. The reason I bring it up, since I assume some of our listeners, watchers are older, more senior, neuropathy is common. And, you know, if you don't like what they're using, find someone else. You're ultimately going to find somebody. It only took me 10 years, but you could probably do it in less.
Right.
End of advertising. I'm not pushing the drug specifically. I'm pushing the treatment.
Okay, I've got my thought that I lost there momentarily. It happens. Saw a poll today. And I'm bringing this up in the context of Democrats do their own thing where we are no longer a representative government in this country. We're a government of elitists and ideologues, and they damn well do what they want to do, regardless of what the constituency wants them to do. Case in point, the poll I saw today, the people in this country who think the issue of climate change is number one on the hit parade is in the single digits. It's less than 10%. Now, just everybody who's listening to this podcast, think for a minute. Is that where the Democrats, the party, puts the issue of climate change? Hell no. They just got back from a conference over in Europe, and everybody flew in their private jets and, you know, wined and dined and ate caviar and patted each other on the back. And then they got back in their private jets, and half of them didn't go back to work. They jumped on yachts and went on extended vacations. And I bring it up because it burns me up. We've always had climate change on Mother Earth. Little nuance here. It used to be they were shoving down our throat that it was man-made. You don't much hear man-made anymore. Tell me if I'm wrong, Dick. What the man-made's been dropped, and it's just, hey, the climate change is such that California is burning up, the forest fires out west are climate change. If we have a hurricane in the Gulf, even though this was one of the lightest years for hurricanes in the history of keeping data on hurricanes, nonetheless, if you talk to a leftist, you know, the hurricanes are of greater intensity and of higher frequency. So they're not so much blaming man, they're just saying the planet is changing and we need to, change the planet to get things back in equilibrium. I'll use that term. Well, number one, that's a kind of an egocentric thought. Number two, they dropped the man-made because if it's, when Kamala Harris arrived in Paris to go shopping for pots and pans, she had an entourage of something like 15 SUVs. I mean, what's the carbon footprint of Kamala accomplishing nothing but going around the world? What's the carbon footprint of the Pope, who does go around the world and preach climate change? And what's his carbon footprint? So man-made has had to go by the wayside because it's a huge contradiction in terms for liberals. But they really think that we can all get together, do some kumbaya, and as an example, go from gasoline-powered automobiles, diesel-powered automobiles, and trucks, and we'll use electric cars. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, they don't want nuclear power, and they're trying to decimate the coal industry. So, and no new dams. They'd rather tear down a dam than add a new one. So no hydroelectric power. We'll put these, what do you call these large wind turbines? Is that the right term, Dick?
Yep.
That in turn kill all the birds as they pass through, the migrating birds. I mean, the whole thing to me is muddled. And China's refused to sign the accords. India has refused to sign the accords, and Russia has refused to sign the accords. Now, those are major countries, both in geography and density of population, and they're not going to participate.
Well, hold it. There's an alternative.
Oh, okay.
We can have an asteroid hit the Earth and kill off all the modern dinosaurs and start the whole cycle all over again. Or we can have another ice age, which we had 10,000 years ago.
What if we could use our...
Oh, and don't forget, the electricity for the cars is made with fossil fuels.
What could we harness our technology to have that meteor strike just make radical liberals extinct?
No, not unless we talk about it next week, because we are way, way over. And really, you being the transporter guy and me being the logistician, I think we really got to figure out what to do with the supply crunch.
Well, I was ready to talk about that.
Well, you can't because you're out of time.
Well, we'll come back to it next week because I have some additional thoughts from a previous podcast, or some insights anyways.
Okay. See you next week.
Okay. Glad you're in good fettle.
Yeah.